Good afternoon, this is Media Center Ukraine Odesa, and we are starting today. You can watch us online, both on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. And now we are going to discuss the situation in the front line together with the military expert Mykhailo Zhyrokhov. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our work today. Let's start with the current situation at the front line. What can you say about that with some details, if possible? Unfortunately, there is not so much great news because the situation is difficult at the front line, and the Russians attack almost in all directions. And especially it comes about Avdiivka, and they plan to occupy it in the nearest future, but they have been planning that since 2014. And they use a lot of armed equipment, and the situation is almost critical there. At least it is very difficult, and it is difficult to anticipate anything. Everything depends on weather conditions in the nearest future. And the situation is difficult near Bakhmut. Unfortunately, Russians have their partial tactical success, and they also continue their offensive there. This is how the winter period starts, that somehow changes the situation at the front line. Why occupiers just try to occupy Avdiivka so hard? What advantages they can get as the result? They attack because they can. And those reserves that they had for our counteroffensive are now used. And also, this is in line with the task of Putin. This is to reach the administrative borders of the Donetsk region and to do this as soon as possible. And when it comes to Bakhmut, it is not that successful, and the only option they have is Avdiivka. But from the military point of view, Avdiivka will not allow them to reach the strategic space, because after Avdiivka there are two more fortification lines that were created back in 2015, 2016, and now they just try to do something in haste, and they have additional forces there, and I believe that the General Staff manages the situation, and even if Avdiivka falls, they will be able to minimize losses from that. So in other words, I understand that Putin needs to show to his population at least some results, some victory on the eve of the so-called elections of Russia's president. They have different milestones, like the New Year elections, and before the elections, they try to solve settle all the tasks of the special operation, as military operation, as they call this, by the end of this year. As for trained fighters who are involved in the battles for Avdiivka, first of all, these are people who signed contracts with Russia's army, and they have quite a lot of them because the salaries are really very high there. And secondly, those soldiers are just recruited from the prisoners. This is so-called Storm Z, and they have also joined the Russian army. And the third component, these are people mobilized in the occupied territories. These are the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. And so they fight for Avdiivka. How can you change the situation in the left bank of the Kherson Oblast? And we have some public information, but it's like not that much. And the military ask not to disclose information about all the operations there. But anyway, we know that there are some successes. And how can you assess it on the left bank? And here I will be very careful in providing information because information, of course, is not enough. And some small bridgeheads that were made before that are now being united in one bridge hold to be able to attack the enemy's communications. And they are successful, especially if we watch the video published by both our party and Russians. And they have some significant losses there, and they don't even try to hide this information. The fact that they have started using aircraft against that bridgehead shows that it slowly but becomes bigger, and now this is a strategic threat and not the local one. Because to administrative border from Crimea is only 80 kilometers. And they now try to choose whether to use all the forces for Avdiivka or just to use forces on the left bank. Do you agree with this? No, I cannot agree with this. Russians have enough manpower to be effective in both directions. And these are local operations. This is not at the army level or the division level. This is the level of brigades. And near Avdiivka, and I would like to repeat this, is that they use the 1st and 2nd Army Corps of collaborators. And there are no problems with the reserves. Of course, these people will be used rather quickly, but at the moment they have enough manpower there. Everyone expected counteroffensive in Ukraine, from Ukraine. But what can you tell about Russia? Can we expect counteroffensive in the winter period of 2023-2024? I'd like to repeat once again that this will depend on the weather. If the winter is not is cold, it is impossible to have any offensive for any armies because this affects communications and this affects the situation. If it's -8, -10, then of course they can try to organize on one of the direction. If, for example, they occupy Avdiivka and some another zone to organize there some offensive. But this fully depends on weather conditions. What strategy the armed forces of Ukraine can use for the winter period? Will they be able to constrain somehow, or how it can happen? I'd like to say that unfortunately our command will try to restrain them. They will use artillery for that, drones, and to attack communications, logistics. But unfortunately, In such local areas, we don't have enough forces for counteroffensive. You say when you say that there are no forces, do you mean manpower or equipment? I'm talking about the trained reserves. We cannot say about this without equipment because we cannot say that these people are some real reserve. We're talking about the number of FPV drones, ammunition for artillery. And this is some strategic elements. And we should talk about training here. And so the training is ongoing, but at the moment we don't have some full-scale reserves. How would you assess the level of weapon supply from our Western allies? And we can be honest here that they have significantly decreased their supplies, and they are forecasted that they can decrease even further in 2024. Yes, but for that there are some objective reasons. The weapons from the warehouses of the Western countries have been already supplied to Ukraine. And now we're talking about manufacturing of new ammunition and systems. And this is not that quick process. And they just produce something and give it to us. And that if the war gets longer, we can see such problems. Unfortunately, the American-led list is not operative. The United States, they have enough weapons in the warehouses, but I don't know the reasons. But Lend-Lease is not was never started. And so we can see a lot of criticism that Russia was able just to streamline the process of the production of new weapons, and Ukraine only now starts to somehow launch it. How would you assess that? And after the USSR was dissolved, Ukraine hasn't had any full cycle for the for weapons, and it was only for Antonov factory. All other things, and till it was in specific conditions, and by 2022 the situation was not that good. If you remember, before 2014, the military doctrine had not seen the enemy at all, and that's why it was impossible to produce any powerful weapons, and the army was reformed, resulting to the situation that the generals in charge did not see any prospects for that, and it took 5 years to discuss the projectiles that we need, like 155 or some others. They were investors who were ready to invest into the factory, but no technical task was given for the military, and as a result, as of February 2022, we had no projectiles at all. But we could say honest, there are some successes, and now we can see that Ukraine actively develops its own drones that have become the real disaster for the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Federation. And that was perhaps the only success that were reconnaissance drones, and not only for the state enterprises, but also the private enterprises. And there were some developments that was the beginning of the full-scale invasion, were just launched for the production, like the sea drones, like combat drones. Yes, we don't still have enough of such drones, but at least at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we had a significant advantage in this area over Russians. A year ago, the whole country saw blackouts, outages, and on the eve of this autumn, there were constant discussions that the Russian occupiers would also attack Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Now we don't see such active shelling. How can you explain this? Do they understand that our air defense systems could dawn all of their missiles and we can see the increase in efficiency, or is there any other reason? First of all, there were no significant frosts in Ukraine. Russians are waiting until the temperature falls below zero for quite a long period of time, and people will see significant problems if there is no heating and no power supply. And secondly, Russians don't have so many missiles in their arsenal. So their main focus is those Iran Shaheds, or Geran 2, as they call them. And I think that they are developing tactics. And unfortunately, by the end of this year, we will see massive attacks on energy infrastructure facilities. I will not rely greatly on the air defense system of Ukraine, because the territory of Ukraine is rather large, and it is difficult to cover all the critical infrastructure facilities. So we can speak about the percentage of territories and objects covered by the air defense systems. Yes, most missiles just enter Ukraine through the water area of the Black Sea. And Zelensky has already mentioned about strengthening air defense systems in the Odesa Oblast. We have seen already Patriot in the Odesa Oblast, and we have information that we will have additional number of Gepards. They are mobile teams also to fight Shaheds. These are different types of gun machines and other guns, and I think this is obvious. And I think that in the nearest future, Odessa region will be covered, not to that extent as Kiev or Lviv, but the recent events at the Polish border has proved that without the seaport, without Odessa, the Ukrainian economy will suffer a lot. And yes, yesterday we had a successful operation. The Russian Su aircraft was dawned, and you know that Russians used their aircraft to launch aerial guided bombs to close the corridor and the Black Sea. And yesterday we had our victory. Yes, that was a demonstration. It was a performance for Russians. And that was also in summer in Bryansk, when also there were just interceptions. And this time we were able to dawn Su-24 and pilots. That was not Su-30, but anyway, that was alarming for Russians, that there will be no so easy voyages for them, and that would be difficult for them just to bomb the Odesa region. So we are waiting for other results, and we are waiting for strengthening the air defense system. One more issue in the world mass media, we can see increasing criticism of Ukraine's counteroffensive. We can see the same just inside the country. We remember how people were getting ready. Yes, we could be honest that it is not as successful as it was expected. Have lessons been learned, and should we expect counteroffensives 2.0? First of all, I cannot agree with the criticism of counteroffensive, because this counteroffensive was planned together with our American allies. According to my information, they were some headquarters drills, exercises using a supercomputer and software, and there were 4 such exercises. And Americans are very serious about such simulations, and this is an important part of planning, and it showed that there will be losses, but it will be possible to break through defense. And can we say about the error of Zaluzhny or other generals? I will not say so, because the art of war is still art. And those plans that are developed using maps and computers can see a lot of circumstances that cannot be foreseen at once. That's why, and even in this case, we could see the situation, and we could say that to the advantage of our comment, when they saw first losses, the plan was suspended to avoid even bigger losses, as it was in Brigade 47. Of course, any general staff plans 2 types of operations, both offensive and defense. That's why I think that the plan for the next year either has been already developed or will be completed by spring, and it will be more real, taking into consideration all the lessons learned. And of course, there were errors, there were mistakes, and that will be with the use to the maximum extent possible of everything which is available. But of course, this time we will have less weapons than it was this year. Thank you very much, Mykhailo, for joining us today. In the Media Center Ukraine, Odesa, that was Mykhailo Zhyrokhov, military expert, who was with us online today, and we will continue at noon.